breakfast in the 18th century. What did they really eat? That's our main question for today. Thanks for joining us today on Questions and Answers with James Townsend and Son. First question comes in on this most recent delicious cornmeal pancake episode. This one's Krugsmash. He says, "Hey John, I was wondering how often you are disappointed by how these recipes taste. I understand they're from a different time and that's how they ate back then, but I guess I had my hopes a little too high when I put together some carrot pudding the other day. Still interesting to eat like our forefathers. Keep up the great work." It's a really good question. It's a really kind of interesting topic to delve into and think about. Definitely, we might think of some of these things that are cooked in, not necessarily all of them, but some of them in the 18th century as more bland. But I think most of that is because our modern palates are so highly trained by the amount of sugar we eat and the sort of enhanced flavors that modern foods have been developed with, especially processed foods. They are just intense. And it is kind of hard for us to pull back and kind of understand and appreciate the subtle flavors that we might get in many of these 18th century dishes. Here's Christian Turner on the same episode. He says, "Are the whisks you sell reusable? Also, what material are they made from?" Here's one of the whisks. These guys are made from birch twigs, and they are made for us up in Michigan. And you can't make these all the year long. You can only make them part of the year when you can actually pull the bark off the twigs. So it's kind of difficult to make them, at least sometimes. I've only had mixed success with that, but we have somebody who makes them for us. And many people ask, how you clean them. If they're reusable, he asks. And yes, they are reusable. You can clean them. Just put them in some nice hot water, whisk them around, it cleans them right off, and they last quite a while. Here's a question that came in on the holiday turkey episode. This one is from Fatal Ninja ZX. "John, do you live in an actual old house with a bunch of recording equipment, or is that a background? Also, do you live in the forest?" Our cooking set that we use, the German kitchen set, is a set. It is a background. It's only a half of a room, and the rest of the room has all the camera equipment in it. So, no, I don't live in an actual old house. There's not a whole house that goes along with that set. Do I live in the forest? Basically, yes, I live in a forest, like 40 acres of trees that our house is in there. So, yeah, and most of the woodsy scenes that you see in cooking episodes that are outdoors, those are shot on my property. Here's a question that came in just on the channel itself. It's Zado. He says, "I'm not sure if this was covered in an episode, but how do you get an accurate temperature for your ovens without modern tools?" If you go to I think it's the How to Bake in an Earthen Oven episode, I'm going to put a link down there. We talk about the several different ways that you can get an idea about the temperature of your oven and getting it right as you're baking, because each oven is going to be different depending on its thickness and how it was made and how long you fired it. So there's a lot of variation there. I'll put a link to that episode. That'll help you out with that, gauging the temperature. This one came in on the most recent cooking episode. This is Tracy. "What did Europeans put on their pancakes if they didn't use maple syrup?" Well, the vast majority of the pancake recipes I've looked at recently they just mentioned sprinkling sugar on top. Occasionally, you'll also see them talking about putting either orange or lemon juice on the pancakes along with the sugar. And I'm imagining many times they didn't put any topping on them. They just ate them as it is. Or they might use something like a pudding sauce, which is great stuff. This question came in on the simple apple dumpling or apple pudding episode we did. This is Cam Gibb. He says, is there anything to substitute the linen cloth that we used in that episode? And you can use regular linen cloth. You can use a cotton cloth, any kind of natural fiber that is tightly woven enough. You don't want a real loose woven like a cheesecloth, but anything that's tightly woven, is going to work fine for a boiled pudding. So here's a question that came in on the most recent episode. This is Ski Holma NM. And it is, what is the name of the music you play at the start of every video? Well, we do vary it a little bit, but on the cooking episodes, we use a song called A Spring Dance. Is it a spring dance? A country dance. I got it wrong. A country dance. It's from Jim's New Red Pants, and the group is called Jim's Red Pants. And these CDs we do offer on our website if you're interested. Here's one that came in on the Pan Perdue episode. That was the French toast. It's Elsa 1942. Can you have a substitute for wine if you ever make this recipe for kids? The wine that was in there is cooked, and all the alcohol really gets cooked out. So it's really not too big of an issue there. If you're concerned about that, though, you could use something else, like possibly cider or, white grape juice if you wanted to get kind of the same flavor. Here's another one that came in on the most recent episode. It's Deep Blue 2. How long did you let the mixture sit for it to thicken? And I would say between 5 and 10 minutes is usually enough time for that liquid to soak into the cornmeal. Here's a good one from Anna's Kitchen. She did this on the last Q&A. She said, did they make birthday cakes? Well, you don't see references to birthday cake, at least in the cookbooks. But they generally had celebratory cakes that they used on 12th night and on like even the 4th of July or election cake. They had these celebratory cakes, and they were almost always the same kind of cake, a lot like our fruit cake. If you're interested, make sure to check out the 12th night cake episode that we did. I'll put a link down in the description section. Here's one on the Christmas gingerbread episode that we did. This one's Steven Stacci. I hope I've got that one right. Hi, is it possible to substitute molasses for something else? It's really hard to get my hands on it where I live. Thanks. If you want to substitute something other than molasses in there, I would probably first go to, depending on where you're at in the world. I mean, some things are easier to get than others. You could use a golden syrup, like a treacle. You could use honey, would also be a really good substitute. One of those two would probably be available just about anywhere. And here's a question that came up several times. This one's LBPN. Are these slapjacks the same as hoe cakes? My mom made great hoe cakes, but passed away over 40 years ago before I could learn how she made them. Actually, we're going to be doing something similar to a hoe cake. I think next Monday. It's the, what's it called?
Journey cake.
Journey cakes, yes. And so they are a little bit different. They're generally thicker. So instead of a real thin pancake, they're a bit more like, say, cornbread you'd fry in a pan. So we'll cover that. Make sure to check out the episode next week. Here's a question, very interesting question, on the latest episode. This one's Noor Nahas. I hope I got that one right. Have you guys ever done anything with or about pawpaws? I messaged you guys on Twitter, but didn't get a response. Yeah, we're starting to get a lot of Twitter traffic, and Ryan is the guy who sits on the Twitter channel, and keep trying if you are trying to get a question through on Twitter. But pawpaws, great topic, really interesting. We've only done just a little bit of research on pawpaws. When I grew up, we had a really nice pawpaw patch right across the road, and we harvested them quite often. I only think we ate them once or twice. My sisters like to use the seeds to make necklaces. Anyway, I haven't had a chance to play with them recently. I don't have, while we have pawpaws that grow up around here, you have to have 2 batches of trees to get a lot of fruit. And so while we have the tree, we don't get any fruit out of it. So I am looking to connect with pawpaws more. There is a little bit of research we found. There is a reference to pawpaws in 1774. Let's see. It says, the fruit resembles a middle-sized cucumber. The pulp is very agreeable and very wholesome. So that was a reference from 1774. So it's definitely in some people's thought processes. They were studying it, possibly using it, and eating it. We'll keep digging on that one. Again, on that latest episode with those corn pancakes, TMR Productions, can you add sugar? Yes, you could add sugar right into the mix. And there are some references to like European pancakes where instead of sprinkling sugar on top, they would just put the sugar in the batter. So yeah, sure, it's a viable alternative. Okay, and so there's a last set of questions. They're all kind of grouped together. I want to answer them all in one. There's Betty C. There's Big D Hunter, or Haunter. I'm sorry, got that one. Professor and Mark Pearsall. And they all are kind of questions kind of based around the flour and additions. One of them, Betty C. wants to know, can it be made with buckwheat? Big D Haunter is wondering whether you can do it without wheat flour and finely ground corn flour. What about what can you use instead of wheat flour for those with sensitivities? All these kind of around that same kind of question. You could definitely use buckwheat flour instead. If you're trying to go for a gluten-free, you could probably use rice flour. I think even the question of could you use just corn flour instead or cornmeal and corn flour mix, I am sure that would work out too. There's so many different variations on this. You could make some really interesting things. And as Kevin mentioned to me just now, rye flour was probably one of the main things that they would mix cornmeal with. They used that for different kinds of bread recipes, and undoubtedly they would have used it in a recipe like this also. Okay, so finally we've made it to the main question. I know you've been waiting all this time. This one is Joey the Prius's. It's on this latest cooking episode. Were eggs used as a breakfast food like how we use them today? Did they eat scrambled eggs or fried or poached eggs or whatever else was for breakfast in the 18th century? Well, the answer was yes, 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 and yes. They did do fried eggs, scrambled eggs, poached eggs. They used eggs in a lot of different things. But they're omelets, Kevin asks, says omelets. All those things were common and very common in the 18th century. But there were also many other kinds of breakfast foods. In fact, they seemed to eat just about everything for breakfast. But bath cakes, cocoa, just like a chocolate drink used for breakfast. They did that. Ginger cakes. Lambert's travels through Canada is really interesting. This is a book from 1806 through 1808 when he's traveling through Canada. And he was obsessed with breakfast because he talks about all these different kind of breakfasts he has. Eggs, fried pork, beef steak, apple tarts, pickles, cheese, cider, tea, toast and butter, milk, rump steaks, fish, cakes, coffee, pies, pudding, hominy with sugar, Johnny cakes made of cornmeal and rye, all for breakfast in that early 19th century Canada context. Very, very interesting. Some of these journals are just so full of really, really good information that you wouldn't expect. There you go. Breakfast in the 18th century or in the early 19th century for Mr. Lambert. What we do here on the channel is all about learning about history through experiencing history. And we do that through what we call living history. And if you are interested at all in what we do and you want to know how you would get started, make sure to go and check out our Getting Started course. It's a free course. You just sign up with your email address and it will send you periodic emails where we have episodes where Kevin and I, there's a written part of it and a video portion of it where we talk about exactly how you get started. Step 1, step 2, step 3, all the way through. And there's some really, really interesting information in there. So if you're interested in learning more about history and just how to do it in an experiential way, make sure to check out that course. I want to thank everyone for your very kind comments, your encouragement, your sharing our videos. Very important. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for the questions, and thanks for watching. If you're a new viewer and you haven't subscribed, press the subscribe button up here. That'll take you to a spot where you can subscribe. I want to thank everyone for watching.